Allen, are you going to give it to Lamar Jackson? I know we've talked about this at length in previous podcasts, but I mean, in my opinion, it's a genuine toss up. Where does Richard Sherman lie in this?
It's not a toss up at all for me. I think it's Lamar Jackson's MVP. I think the numbers he put up right now are historic. First 4,900 yard, 40 touchdown, under five interception season in NFL history. This league has been around a long time, and there's been a lot of really incredible players to play. And for somebody to have a first at this point in time, something that's literally never been done in the history of the league. And I know that, what the argument is for Josh Allen, but I think it's just hard for a narrative-based MVP season to go against a statistically based MVP season when your narrative doesn't also include the number one seed and dominance. And so if the Buffalo Bills, Josh Allen led them to a playoff berth and people said, oh, well, nobody picked them to play this well. It would sound better. It would make more sense if the team had actually underperformed at one point. I know they lost a lot of guys. They lost a lot of pieces. They lost Stephon Diggs. They lost a lot of veteran leadership. I understand fully. But what I'm saying is in this situation, you have to also get the one seed. Like they never missed the playoffs. They're a playoff team last year. They're a playoff team this year. So although the narrative out there may have been like, hey, we're not sure how good they're going to be this year, they're coming off a playoff season, so they're still a playoff team, and they're a playoff team this year. So if they were the one seed, 15-2 with the narrative in these stats, then I could see, hey, they're going to give it to Josh Allen. They're the best team in football. He's carrying them to this spot. I know Lamar has had one of the most impressive seasons in National Football League history, but it's tough to say the best player on the best team. I understand that. When you're the two seed, it doesn't carry the same weight. And so Lamar Jackson's carries weight. And I know everybody's like, Derrick Henry, he has good players around him. Yeah, it's kind of how it works. MVPs have good players around them. I mean, that's how it's going to work. You're not going to find MVPs with bad players around them. You're not going to find good teams with bad players around them. You're just not. And Derrick Henry's having a little worse season than he had when he had 2,000 yards. And I mean, it's going to be easier for both of them. It's a good team. It's a good season. That's why he picked him up. But it doesn't take away from 41 passing touchdowns from Lamar Jackson and only 4 interceptions. It's not like he's not throwing the ball at all. He's running the ball well. He's efficient. His offense is scoring. They're winning games. They've won 4 straight in December, and that's winning football. You know what I mean? These awards are usually won in December. People remember the last things you've done. And I know that Josh Allen has had a really good season. I would agree with him. I'd say, man, any other year, if the narrative was this, he'd probably win it. But it's a historic season by Lamar Jackson that's going to make it tough for voters to say, hey, 41-4 isn't going to win it. Like, when is it not won it? When is some numbers like this not won MVP? You find those numbers for me.
Those are absurd stats. Let's look at the defensive player of the year. I know you've been singing his praises all season, and that's Patrick Surtain. He's the overwhelming favorite to win this above TJ Watt and Kirby Joseph and some other guys in there. How happy are you to see that a corner is actually going to win defensive player of the year, or so it looks like?
That's pretty awesome. That's pretty awesome. And it couldn't happen to a better guy. I think he deserves it. Patrick Surtain has played well for so long. And he's really been the standard for corner play over the last 3-4 years. And so for him to add this to his resume, add this to his collection of awards, is what he deserves. He's been a consummate professional. He's been the standard even for college kids. He's been a standard for every coach to teach corners how to play the position. And so I'm happy for him. He's had a great season, 100-yard pick six, made tremendous plays, helped his defense be one of the top defenses in the National Football League. So good for him. Obviously, pass rushers usually get it, and Myles Garrett and TJ Watt are always around. But again, I just feel like they're rushing the passer. A guy playing at a high level on a good defense needs to be celebrated, and that's what they're getting it right this year.
Let's look at the coach of the year. I mean, this is a conversation I'm looking forward to having because, Vegas favors Kevin O'Connell heavily here, followed by Dan Campbell and Sean Payton. Kevin O'Connell obviously brings Minnesota out of nowhere and finishes with a 14-3 record. But, the same could be said for Dan Campbell. I mean, granted, the expectations for the Lions were to win the division and be a Super Bowl contender coming into this season. But still, I would argue that Dan Campbell exceeded expectations with this Detroit Lions team going 15-2. Do you believe it's Kevin O'Connell's award, or do you think Dan Campbell should have equal stake to that?
Well, I think this is when it comes down to whether you believe it's the narrative or the expectations. And I think if it's narrative based, it has to go to Kevin O'Connell because he came in with either a rookie quarterback or an unproven Sam Darnold, a guy who's gone from a top 3 pick to a journeyman, coming from being a backup in San Francisco behind Brock Purdy, and you're really expecting him to start J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy goes out with a meniscus injury, and now you're forced to start Sam Darnold. And just the season that he's had, the season that Brian Flores has had, you're not talking about a bunch of all-pros and pro bowlers on the defensive side of the ball. You're talking about Van Ginkel and Grenard becoming pro bowlers this year in a great scheme under Brian Flores and what they've been able to do, which has been great. What he has done has been masterful. These guys have come together really fast. His scheme has been on display. His guys have played hard for him, and they won 14 games. And this is not a team that you expected to win 14 games. You're talking about a team that you really, I mean, maybe 10 games. You thought 6th, 7th spot in the wild card. They were literally, playing for the 1 seed. And so I think you have to give them credit for what they've been able to build unexpectedly. I think the Lions, you expect it. They were top 2 NFC team last year. They were in an NFC championship. And guess what? They're a top NFC team this year. The San Francisco 49ers had a bad year and fell off the face of the earth. And the Detroit Lions have continued to be what they were last year. And I think, unfortunately, coaches get punished for that. You're not Andy Reid went 15-2, and you're not even thinking about him for coach of the year because it's like,
Right.
You know what I mean? So sometimes you get punished because your team's talented, because the expectations for your team are high, and that's why Kevin O'Connell will likely get it. I mean, that's where Stefanski has multiple coaches of the year and no postseason success to really speak of.
Well, Richard, before we wrap this up, I got to get the landscape of the Richard Sherman power ranks, week 18 style. I know that they're relatively irrelevant now that we're finally in playoffs, but I got to know how you stack up the NFL right now with these power rankings. A lot of teams are playing at a high level. How do you stack them for week 18, Rich?
Well, Kansas City Chiefs go 1, your Detroit Lions 2. 3 would have to be Baltimore Ravens. I'm going to go Baltimore at 3. I'm going to go Buffalo at 4, and I'm going to go Philadelphia Eagles at 5. Until they prove me otherwise, if Buffalo beats Baltimore in Buffalo, then, they color me surprised.
The one team that slide in those power ranks from past weeks is the Minnesota Vikings, fresh off a loss to the Detroit Lions. Like, how much does that loss really impact your view of them as a team?
It doesn't impact my view of them in totality, but it just did show that there was a different level that they haven't reached yet. Especially with Sam Darnold, he looked flustered. He went 0 for 4 in the red zone. And they just, the Lions defense doesn't, they're banged up, they're depleted. And a depleted defense held you out of the end zone 4 times, turnover on downs on one of those drives, and held you to 9 points. And I think probably 6 of those are, like you said, all 9 of them were probably gifts, from turnovers that your defense gave you. So that's where the concern